Sessions podcast. We are doing this as a supplement, an additional conversation to a series we are doing at the Crossing in Las Vegas called Weeds in My Garden, where we're talking about issues around mental health. And this is episode 3 around that. And we are in this Sessions podcast bringing alongside mental health professionals that are here in our community in Las Vegas. And so I have Jennifer and Kelly here as we are going to talk about kids and teens, which I'm excited about because I have kids and teens. So I feel like this is going to be super relevant to my life. Yeah. I will be taking lots of notes in this. And I know that you are both parents, and you also are both on a professional level dealing with kids and teens in that. And from my understanding, the research shows that kids and teens are dealing with mental health issues on a rate or at a pace that really has been unprecedented within at least the United States of America in our history. Is that something that you guys are seeing and recognizing in your own practices and lives?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I think definitely just going back in the last 3 years, right? COVID, right?
Yeah,
Trigger warning. COVID sparked a definite increase in the mental health. I primarily work with the teen population, and so I saw a lot of youth that were coming in, experiencing increased anxiety, depression, thoughts of suicide and self-harm. And so this could not be more relevant right now.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, same. Like same. Ditto. Yeah, totally. It's a thing that it's a thing that's happening. Yeah, that more kids are expressing just a general sadness, thoughts of worry and anxiety. It has become a consistent part of their life, which is why we need to have this conversation. Whether and I would say this conversation absolutely important for parents, right, or any kind of caregiver. But a lot of us are encountering kids on a weekly or daily basis. Like there are kids around in our lives. There are kids in our neighborhoods. There are kids in our church. There are kids that we are connected to in some way. And so we need to be able to have this conversation and really have this conversation to try and wrap our minds around in some way. I think one of the difficulties in me, or one of the challenges that I look at and go is my kids literally live in a different world than I lived in.
Yes, they do.
And so that means I have to work at having the conversation. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things that you start to, as you kind of like maybe coach parents on and trying to engage in these conversations? What are the things that us adults need to be able to bring to that?
Mm-hmm. So I think number one, having age appropriate conversation, and that starts with being prepared yourself, right? So working with teens, a lot of times I would hear parents say, I don't know what the problem is. You don't know what stress is. You didn't grow up the way I did.
Right.
But the truth is we're not growing up the way that they are right now.
Yeah.
Right. So, if we're going to go into some heavy topics, my kids might come home and say, we had a soft lockdown at school today.
Right.
That's not a conversation that I was ever having when I was in elementary, middle, or high school.
Right.
And so it is a different world. And it's a world that with the greater access to social media, the news, things like that, they are more aware of. They're living in it. They're experiencing it. And as parents, the best thing we can do is to not minimize what they might be experiencing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And along those lines with the increase, especially in anxiety and depression with kids is, it's the not minimizing. It's, I remember my dad saying like, I walked to school holding hot potatoes and like in a sense, we're doing that to our kids by saying, get over it. You're fine.
Right.
Suck it up.
Right.
And it just like we didn't listen to our parents with their outlandish stories.
Yeah.
They're not listening to us. And
Yeah.
so really the key is connection. It's conversation.
Right.
It's saying, talk about that. What does that feel like for you? I see that you're scared. I know the impact of social media on you. I know what your friends are doing. So instead of like you're saying minimizing, it's really opening it up to a conversation where I'm safe for you.
Yeah.
We can talk about this.
What does that look like I mean, especially kind of in that middle school, that preteen into teenage, like just kind of getting into the conversation. I mean, we've all had the experience as a parent, like, how was your day at school? Fine. Just you're getting one word answers. Is there anything that we can do to like set up a great way to have a conversation?
Yeah, I think that starts with connection that's formed even earlier in their lifetime.
Don't wait until that moment is what you're saying.
Don't wait until they're angsty teens to be like, I really care about what you're feeling.
Right.
Like ideally that would start as babies, you know. In our field, we talk a lot about attachment. So there's different attachment styles that kids have to their parents. Ideally, we're securely attached. If you're dad, I'm connected to you. I trust you. I know that you're going to take care of me.
Right.
You've got good, healthy boundaries around us. I'm safe. For a lot of kids, they feel there's either avoidant, which means I can't trust you. There's a wall between us. Or anxious, like sometimes I can trust you and sometimes I can't. Sometimes you're safe relationally and sometimes you're not.
Wow.
And then there's also a mix of kind of the both.
Sure.
But ideally, our kids would be securely attached to us from an early age so that they know that they can depend on us for these conversations.
Right.
Like you don't want to figure this out when they're 13 and it's like... this is your life.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You've got all kinds of hormones, and you're trying to figure this out in the midst of it. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And you don't want to have these conversations also like only when there's an emergency, only when you're feeling down or you're feeling anxious or anything like that. This has to be a regular practice of who you are as a family or as a parent or a caregiver.
It's amazing how much tradition for my kids matters. So we started, I don't even know, a year ago when Wordle came out. At dinner, we would do Wordle together. And as you know, my daughter's starting to learn to read and understand things more. She's starting to pipe in, and we miss a night and it's like, Mom, we didn't do Wordle. But that, it starts a conversation, a dialogue. It's like, yes, you got it. Like, I can't believe, we nailed this as a family. And then that can even open up different conversations. So tell me a time today that you were your happiest. That doesn't include recess or lunch.
Yeah.
Right? And so kind of helping the younger ones have a dialogue. Or tell me about a time that you felt left out.
Right.
Or did you see anybody left out? Kind of just asking more open-ended questions where it's not like, how was your day?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of along the Wordle. So my kids are adults, they're 21 and 23, and we play Wordle as a family, but we just text each other. We have a group chat and we just post our results. And so it's the same thing, it just looks different because they're all adults.
Right.
But yeah, it's that connection. It's that we are having shared experience and it's meaningful.
Yeah.
It matters.
Yeah. The idea that shared experience is what leads into meaningful conversation.
Yeah.
Right. To kind of sit down and say, okay, we're going to have a meaningful conversation doesn't bring about meaningful conversation. Yeah. Right.
They're like,
what's
am I in
wrong?
trouble?
Right.
Yeah,
What's happening right now?
Yes.
Yeah. I have 3 kids. They are ages 13, 9, and 5. And so that means it feels like each of them is in a different phase of life and doing different things. And so I have to parent them all differently. And I think that's true of all kids, right? Whether your kids are close together in age, they require some kind of different parenting. Yeah. And so maybe talk about a little bit of like, some of the things that like, hey, this is what children may generally need. Obviously kids are unique, but like these are some of the things that they generally need in different phases of their life. And then, talking about, things and then we'll get into maybe some things that we can adopt as parents and practices around that.
Want me to start with the little ones? So with the little ones, ideally I'm creating a safe environment for you physically, but also emotionally and relationally. And so in the beginning stages of parenting, it's a lot of no No, right?
Right,
I'm
right,
sure.
right. Yeah, absolutely.
And so ideally, you're
Please
gonna,
don't touch the stove.
Right.
No.
Correct. So ideally, you're going to move from that. But still, as parents, it's our job to protect and help our kids with boundaries and understanding
Yeah.
that. And so when you think about connection and emotions, it's really teaching them, beginning at a young age, to express their emotions, to validate their feelings, their emotions.
Yeah.
It's interesting with kids, so much of how we relate to them. If you look back, usually it's how our parents related to us.
Right.
And so unless we're intentional about changing that, we're going to do the same things that our parents did to us, good or bad.
Yeah.
And so even when you think about your relationship with your little ones, think back on your childhood. How did your parents feel about emotions?
Right.
Temper tantrums.
Right.
Were you scolded for having a temper tantrum, or was that okay?
Right.
Were emotions allowed, or were they dismissed?
Right.
What was that like? And chances are good that however you were raised, it's what you're doing with your kids.
Wow.
And so really taking time, I guess, to process and to think through, what kind of parent do I want to be?
Yeah.
What's best for my kid based on their age,
Based
on, our family system, kind of all of that. But when they're little, the main things are security. I love you. I can trust you. You're going to take care of me.
Yeah.
Boundaries. There has to be boundaries. And then that emotion connection and figuring that out together, which hopefully continues on through preteens and
And that's directly what I was thinking, that all of those are the same basic needs. Right. And that the more that you've established that at a younger age, it's going to look different as you get older. Right. So as my son is getting older, we talk about having a yes bank, right? I'm going to find ways to say yes as many times as I can within appropriate reason, within boundary, not as I'm going to spoil them, but to allow them the yes, so that when I have to pull the no, it means something. It's like, this is a strong line here, and this is why I'm saying no.
Right.
I think sometimes, I know that there's times where I'm like, because I said so. That's why. I just need you to do it, right?
I just need you to do it right now because I said so.
Because I'm working at home right now and I don't have any time and I'm making dinner and I just need you to accept the no. Right. In those moments, when we have time, when we have that space to meet with them and talk to them and give them reasons. This is why we do things that we do. Bringing it back to, this is what God says about the best way, right? The Bible isn't about rules. It's about, these are like really amazing guidelines that help us to be the most successful in the world around us, right? And so when we incorporate that into our parenting, it allows us to teach them as they age, right? Teach them as they're experiencing the world differently, right? As their brains and their bodies are growing and developing, or as the teenagers when the brain shuts off, So, I would say that that's huge. And just learning your children being connected enough to where this personality, my child is this personality and this works for them. Right. This child might be this personality and this works for them. Right. So the other thing I would say about teens is that if you can't get them to talk, take them out for ice cream and sit next to them. Don't sit face to face, because a lot of times you're going to get more dialogue when you're not having that eye contact. So that's
car rides.
Little trick.
That's another trick. Car rides.
Yep.
Yeah. Bring ice cream in the car, go for a ride, because then they don't have that awkward eye contact, and they can just kind of freeform, and
it lowers the wall a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of the best conversation I've had with my 8-year-old is random shouts of information from the back seat.
Right.
And then we just go for it.
Yeah. That's so great.
Yeah.
It's interesting, as you were talking about a bank of yes, is like, when they're young, it's just, you're trying to keep them alive.
Yes.
And so there is a lot of boundaries, right? But as you get older, you do have to start letting kids explore some of the boundaries, and allow them even a boundary where it's like, here's a choice. You get to make that choice. There are some consequences. There are some pros and cons, but you get to make the choice within reason, right? We're helping, and hopefully to the point where by the time they're adults or 18 or 18, your brain's not even formed yet, but you're legally responsible. You can start to, you have the ability then to make wise choices
Right.
in that, because we've given them that
Right.
practice along the way.
Yeah. I think kind of along those lines, it's really important for parents to understand basic child development. There's a lot of parents who have expectations on their kids that are unrealistic due to age level. It's expecting your 2-year-old to be able to have a conversation that he or she can't.
Right.
It's expecting your teen to make really wise choices when a teen brain can. This part of the brain is not fully developed till you're 25.
Right.
It's why you can't rent a car, and if you're under 25, because
Right,
the
right.
insurance companies know this kid is not going to make good decisions.
Right,
They're going
right,
to be
right.
reckless. And so understanding your child, not only personality, I would add to that one too, their love language, how they give and receive love
Yeah.
is important, but then also developmentally where they're at. Because sometimes the expectations of parents are wrong. They're too high.
Yeah.
They're not appropriate given the age of the child.
Yeah.
So it's just a really good thing to remember.
And that's where we can reach out to someone who is a professional. It's okay to do family therapy
Yes,
together, or to engage in therapy with parents and a child or something like that, because we're all trying to learn in that process together. I heard one comedian joke about how every family is an organization. He was joking about going on a family vacation. He's like, every family's an organization. It barely works at home. Why would you take it on the road? Which is a great joke. I think part of, as we deal with raising kids and teens and trying to thrive, is there's also a little bit of maybe comparison among families, right? And trying to figure out, well, what works for my family. How do we start to avoid some of the traps of comparison, or doing it like that, or even doing it like that because that's the way we've always done it in our own family? What are the questions that we need to ask ourselves in order to work within that and create a healthy system where a kid could grow up and thrive?
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of sidebar for a minute.
Yeah, that's fine.
So
Yeah.
we were, there's a show called The Parent Test, I believe it is. And I don't know if you've seen it, but basically they bring together, I think, like 12 different families and different parenting styles. And then they vote on who's the best parenting style. And I think that's so interesting.
Right.
Right. What is it about? That almost goes back to our own tradition of how we were raised. And that seems like that works. And that person had too much expectation and that person didn't have enough. And, I think the truth of it is that it's about learning, again, your own family. It's about increasing communication, age appropriate discussion, right? So for us, it's going to be having those conversations of, hey, tell me about that word that you just said. What do you know about that? Where did you learn that topic? Things like that. Bringing in their own interests, right? So that they have a voice. So because it's not just a dictatorship, right? We're all little individuals,
right? They're
and
real people.
The goal is to help them, raise them to where they can be healthy enough to go out and conquer the world on their own.
Yeah.
And we can't do that if we're constantly saying, this is what you do, this is how you do it, this is how you think, right? So part of it is helping them understand, and within their own age limit, why do we do certain things, or what do you think about that? I think that can be very healthy, because then you can have discussion about, again, this is what God says about that, right? The world is going to tell you a lot of different messages.
Right.
So find out what they think.
Right.
Find out what their own environment is.
Yeah.
And then, you can kind of work within that, help shape that.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that's really good. It's interesting because, sometimes it does feel like, my kid doesn't experience that, or my kid, my kid hasn't had, battles with anxiety or, depression, or, my kid hasn't heard about that. And the reality is that they probably have. And so we're trying to have habits within the family, before so that we can bring those things to the conversation, right? And have open and honest conversations around that. Is that a common misconception among parents? They're like, oh no, that I'm pretty sure they've never done that before, or heard that or whatever.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why is not like they're naive and they don't know their kids. I think it's more that they don't understand the role of social media in their children's lives. And so it's not, like they're exposed to so much.
Yeah.
We were not exposed to nearly, I mean, I'm older than both of you, but like, I promise we weren't exposed
No.
to the things
Yeah,
that
yeah.
our kids are.
Yeah.
One click and they're seeing pornography
Right.
without even searching for it.
Right.
And so there's a lot more happening in their world than happened in ours. You
Yeah.
know, back in my day, we had a corded phone, house phone, and
Yeah.
that was it.
That's it.
And
Yeah,
like, that's communication.
I remember that.
I feel so much younger.
The rotary.
That's right.
And so I think part of it is just it's that parents don't understand how much information is being funneled to their kids through social media, through friends, all of it. Yeah.
Well, and as a mental health therapist, I work in juvenile justice. I've worked for Child Protective Services. My lens of the world is very different. I have seen growing up in the church as well that we do have maybe this idea that our kids are protected or we don't talk about certain things, right? But my challenge to that would be we want to give our kids the best ability to be successful.
Yeah.
And the world is happening whether we believe they're experiencing it or not, right? There's a lot of times you'll hear parents say, well, that's not in my neighborhood.
Right.
Right. Or that's not my kid's situation. But the truth is we don't really know.
Right.
And so, things will pop up and I'll ask my kids now, or we're having conversations about safe bodies or, it's not just about stranger danger anymore. Like it goes beyond so much more than that. And going back to that parent test, it's, oh, my kid would never do that. Or the Dateline, what would you do?
Yeah,
my kid would never do that. And then they ultimately do that.
Right.
It's remembering that repetition. We all learn by repetition, and our kids are going to need repetition over and over and over.
Right.
I also remind my kids that the conversations we're having at home, other parents may not be having with their kids.
Sure.
And so it's important that we let other parents teach their kids and that we don't necessarily go to school and say, this is what we believe, or, allowing other families to kind of, not just relying on school to teach our kids or, like you said, peers. Our teenagers are good for, there's a switch that goes off, I think, when you hit like 13, where it's like the parent volume goes down and the peer volume goes up. Yep. And so the more relationship we have with our kids, hopefully we've kind of built enough in there knowing that you can have the hard conversations with me. There's no topic that's off limit. My answer is going to look different depending on your age.
Right.
But I will have some type of answer
that's
and
so
conversation with you.
I'm willing to have the conversation. I have two thoughts that I don't want to lose either of them, hopefully. So one would be, what then, obviously, as parents, we want to be engaged and intentional, or caregivers or guardians. We want to be engaged and intentional in that. How important is it for kids to have other adult voices in their lives besides our own?
I think it's super important. So my husband's a pastor, and so my kids have been involved in church their whole lives. And my son's getting married, and when you ask him, who do you want to be in your wedding, a lot of those people are people who were his youth leaders, people who are friends of ours who were adults.
Right.
His tribe, his group of people consists of kids his age, but also older people. I keep thinking like the people that taught him how to tie a tie wasn't my husband. It was his small group leader.
Right.
And how to create a budget, it was my small group leader. And so assuming that the people in their lives you trust as a parent,
right.
I think it's really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, that parent switch, sometimes it doesn't work unless it's someone else's voice. But I think that that's for all of us, right?
Right.
Our spouse, we can have a conversation or our spouse can have a conversation with us, but unless our best friend says it, oh my gosh, guess what?
Right.
So definitely I grew up, my parents were the, volunteer youth leaders, my whole journey. And there was those people that also served alongside that we knew, hey, you can go and talk to them and it's going to be okay. And they're not going to come and talk to me unless it's something that's a safety issue or, something that we would really need to talk about as a family.
I think that's especially important. We're here in Las Vegas. One of the things that is unique about Vegas is that a lot of people transplant here. And sometimes that means that they don't have those traditional kind of family structures. And so as a pastor, I would advocate that church becomes one of those structures where it's like, no, there are some healthy adults that are speaking into my own kids' lives and they want to see them thrive and just as much as I do. At the same time, there are times where like there are issues and that we have our own parents, we maybe mentors or books or whatever resources we have on parenting, but sometimes issues do arise. When do we go, hey, this is when you start to go, we need to get some extra help, whether that is for my child as an individual or as a family, we all kind of need some extra help. What are some of the warning signs, the things that you go, hey, this is when you would need to reach out?
Yeah.
So I think that as a therapist, it's funny how my kids are starting to really understand what I do. And again, that backseat. Hey, Mom, do you think I need therapy? Do you think I need brain spotting? And so I will sometimes ask them, do you feel like this is something that you would want to keep talking to Mom or Dad about this? Or would you ever want to talk to somebody else about this? So again, normalizing that therapy relationship.
Right.
There's so many dynamics when it comes to wanting to seek out therapy. There's this idea of, again, we should be able to handle this on our own, or we keep all of this within the family unit.
Yeah, right.
Or, even our communities of color, there's a different conversation about what it means to seek out mental health treatment. And so I personally believe if it's beyond something that you feel like you have the skill set for, whether that's as a parent, in a relationship, with your partner, whatever that looks like, it's, maybe we just need to phone a friend, right? We need to call that lifeline to say, maybe I'm just a little bit out of my scope, right?
Right.
And it's okay to say, we're just kind of at an impasse right now. We're not really seeing things eye to eye. And so maybe there's somebody else that might have some different ideas. Yeah. Not that I am a bad parent or can't figure it out, but let's bring somebody else into the conversation.
Yeah. A couple thoughts. One is my kids have always been in counseling, not because the problems are so bad, but because I want them to have support and I want them to have a place other than me to talk about things and a place to talk about me. Where
a place to talk about me.
Where
it's so good.
And I'm very pro-therapy, obviously, as a therapist, but I didn't become a therapist until later in my life.
Right.
And so it's just been a theme for me as I've struggled with anxiety and depression at times where I'm like, okay, guys, this, like you're saying, you need some other people to talk to.
Right.
And some of my favorite clients actually are ones where I started seeing them in elementary school. And I just had one this week where she's graduating from high school this year. And I've been with her since she was in fifth grade.
Yeah.
And it's not because she's so messed up.
Right.
It's because her parents were wise enough to say, we want a healthy adult on her side, helping her through. I don't see her every week. It's not that.
Yeah.
But we're connected enough where at, this week's session, it was like, holy cow, look at you. You're graduating from high school.
Yeah.
And she was like, we've been together since fifth grade.
Yeah.
And it's just such a beautiful, healthy relationship. And it's really good for the kid, but it's also really good for the parents to know that I'm on their side.
Right.
And it's like an extension of them.
Right.
It's great parenting.
Yeah. I like the idea of there's no conversation off limits. That we are not always the expert, whether that's, about our kids or about our own lives. We're not always the expert. We have limitations. It's good to recognize our own limitations. And the idea of I guess therapy isn't always about like the negative, right?
Correct.
The emergency.
Yes.
That there's an aspect of therapy probably more helpful, to be honest, if it's more preventative or
Right.
just kind of a regular practice. And I don't know that that's something that we always consider in that conversation.
It's the oil changes, right? We want to keep our car running. And so therapy to me, I've had clients for years that are just like, tell me how your week has been the last couple of weeks. And we just work through the little things. And, sometimes it's just nice to have a safe space. If I go to therapy, as a therapist, I'm the worst client ever. And so sometimes I'm like, I don't even know that I need you to say anything back. I just need to be able to like get it out there, get it off my chest, and then kind of move, it's letting it go so that there's more capacity for the next thing. The other thing I wanted to mention, I want to bring up the idea of our foster families, our families that have, children with disabilities. There are resources. It's not just about going to talk about our emotions. There are resources out there that help us maybe explain things that we may not fully understand, right? And so I just really think it's so important that we have professionals that can help give us answers. As parents, when we have children that may have a disability, we may not know what's exactly going on, but we just know, I know that when they play with their friends, their 2-year-old friends don't necessarily show the same behaviors. Or, my teenager may not show the same behaviors as I'm seeing in their group of peers. And so what if it's worth kind of just getting a second opinion?
Right.
Like if we had some type of medical, need, we might ask for a second opinion. Right. And so a lot of times it's saying somebody that maybe has a different lens than I do. There's no shame in saying, I need help. My kids might need some different services or some different resources.
Right.
And it's okay to reach out for that.
And as you're talking about different resources, I think sometimes we don't realize the resources that are available to us, right? So, at the Crossing, you have a resource of pastoral staff. That's one level. But we also go, oh, hey, we know some therapists, and we make recommendations around that. But even beyond that, kind of outside that spiritual community, a school counselor is a great resource because they have a different lens and they know the things that are then connected in the community, and you can get that right through your child's school. There are you're maybe a medical doctor or a pediatrician that's a resource there that you can at least reach out and say, okay, I'm noticing this. What would you say? And they are the experts in that area, and they can really point you to some really helpful things in that case. Is there anything else that you're like, this is kind of out there in the community? Like, this is completely random, but like parents, one of the best things for your kids is like the library. Yeah. Like the librarians know so much stuff, and there's like you can get passes to the Discovery Museum, here in Las Vegas through the library. You get an iPad through the library. There's all kinds of stuff there. Like there's these hidden community resources that I think sometimes we don't know about within our kids and teens' lives. Are there any others that you say, hey, like this is something that people don't reach out enough to?
So I would say within the teen community. So first of all, resources in general, 211 is something that you can go online and you can put in different topics, whether it's housing, electricity, food, you can research different topics. It's going to give you different community organizations that specialize in that. Right. The other thing is Mobile Crisis through the state has a response team that as a caregiver, if you call, if you have a youth that is experiencing self-harm thoughts, suicidal ideation, things like that, you can call that number. They will send somebody out to meet with your family. Wow. If it's something that, hey, all we would need to do is get you connected to an outpatient therapist, or they're going to know more about what resources are out in the community. And so I think that's a really great initial call. Yeah. And I don't know the number off the top of my head, but if you just Google DCFS, the Mobile Crisis Response Team, it's going to give you all the information. It's a 24-hour hotline. Yeah. And so that's a really good intervention. Most schools will know about that as well, but the caregiver definitely has to call.
Got it. That's great. Okay. Are there anything else that you would say, hey, as you are, to maybe to parents, those caregivers, a final thought of like, hey, you're dealing with kids and teens. You come with it with this attitude, or here's what you need to know, or a final thought around that.
Yeah. For me, I would say hang in there.
Yeah.
I'm on the back end of it.
Yeah.
And so it's wonderful to be best friends with your adult kids. And the reason I am is because I've been since they were babies intentional about connection. And so connecting with them as a baby obviously looks different than 21, but it's worth the time, the effort. It's worth all of that.
Man.
Because if you can be that close to your adult kids, it makes everything awesome.
Wow.
It's amazing. So hang in there, put in the hard work, get help if you need it.
That's good. That's really good. How about you, Kelly?
So I heard a statistic one time that if you get parenting correct 50% of the time, you're nailing it.
Man.
Yeah.
Right? I don't
Wow.
have to make the dolphin sandwich, Pinterest, cookie cutter sandwiches for my kids' lunchbox every day.
Right.
If I'm showing up,
Yep.
I think apologizing can be the greatest gift we give our kids. Because I don't know,
good.
I'm perfect as a parent. Maybe you need to hear this. But I mess up. There's
Yeah.
moments where I'm rushing in the morning to get to work and it's like, oh my gosh, you know,
Right.
hey, I will call and say, I have to apologize because I wasn't my best in that moment. And yeah, I was frustrated because you weren't moving as quickly as I needed you to, but I should not have raised my voice.
Right.
What a precious gift that we can give to our kids,
Yeah.
that humility, that apology. I'm going to mess up,
Yeah.
but I love you. Ending every day with I love yous, even if we had a rough bedtime,
Right.
going back, taking a deep breath, calming down, giving yourself grace. This is, we're about the culture of comparison, but the truth is it's just about you and your family.
Wow.
And just giving yourself grace to get through the next moment. And that's okay. God's going to give it to us.
That's amazing. Thank you guys so much for spending some time talking about this. This is a super important topic because our kids are navigating a world that is really unknown to us as parents, and they are dealing with issues, and really they are maybe a better generation in being aware of their own mental health in some of this regard. And so we can be intentional in part of that. And so hopefully this conversation has been helpful in that. Thanks for joining us for this session's podcast, and I hope you get to join us for the next one.